There are various comic book channels on YouTube that talk about Secret Wars, and they all cover fairly standard aspects of it. So if you want a show that talks about how Secret Wars was a response to DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths, or how it featured the very first appearance of Spider-Man in his black suit, then I suggest you go and watch those reviews now. This probably isn't for you. I'll see you back here for, I don't know, Kraven's Last Hunt probably. So go on, off you go. Bye-bye. Bye. 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 They've gone. For those of you that remain, you know how we roll here. We use the C word, comprehensive. We review storylines comprehensively. So here it is, our comprehensive review of Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars. Part 1. Pray continue. In 1984, Kenner, the company that changed the face of the toy industry with its work on the Star Wars line of action figures, signed a deal with DC Comics to release a range of figures based on their superheroes. Mattel, no strangers to success with action figures themselves thanks to He-Man, responded by signing a similar deal with Marvel Comics. Well, there you go. That's the toy line history covered already. If you want a more detailed look at the history of the Secret Wars toys, check out Toy Galaxy's video. Mind you, it's only 7 minutes long. Pah! Call that a video, more like an advert. As part of the deal, Mattel required Marvel to release an event-type comic series to tie in with the figures and raise their profile. This chimed in nicely with then Editor-in-Chief Jim Shooter, who would regularly receive letters from fans requesting a big storyline featuring as many heroes and villains as Marvel could throw at it. In addition, he decided that the best person to write the thing was him. Marvel had plenty of other writers that were up to the job, but he viewed them as being very possessive and protective of their usual characters, and he predicted a lot of fallouts should one of them treat the other's characters in a way that they didn't agree with. So, to avoid the arguments, he took the job on. So it was that in issue 11 of Marvel Age, cover dated February of 1984, the first mention of the event was made. And here it is. An adventure which is so grand in scope that it takes a 12-part special limited series to chronicle. Cosmic Champions is the name of this 12-part extravaganza? Well, this is definitely it. I mean, it says it's 12 parts. It mentions the Beyonder. It also says that it would explain the many changes that Marvel's heroes have undergone. For example, Spider-Man getting a new costume and the Fantastic Four losing and gaining a member. But Cosmic Champions? It is an oft-told story that Mattel held a focus group where they threw a number of words at a group of young kids to see which ones connected the most. The most popular words were war and secret. As a result, the toy line and its accompanying comic series would be called Secret Wars. I can only assume that that bulletin was written before the results of the focus group were known. Those results had been passed on by the time issue 12 of Marvel Age came out. This is a magazine that's become famous for featuring a preview of Spider-Man's black suit, but we aren't interested in looking at that today. Instead, let's have a look at that cover, which features a version of the front cover of Secret Wars issue 1. I say version because it is different. This is the version that was used in house ads in the comics promoting the upcoming series, and it differs from the cover of issue 1 in one significant aspect. It includes Kitty Pryde in her Ariel persona, before she changed her name to Shadowcat. So what gives? Why was she there 1 minute and gone the next? The man who drew the cover, Mike Zeck, says that he was told to just draw a bunch of characters from the X-Men, along with all the others. So he assumed that Kitty Pryde, a popular character from her very debut 4 years before, would be included. She wasn't. It is said that Jim Shooter had always been uncomfortable with the romantic relationship between Colossus, who was 18 or 19 years old, and the 14-year-old child, Kitty Pryde. And he saw Secret Wars as a way of splitting them up, especially if he could write in some new love interest for Colossus. To find out where Kitty was, and to see how the rest of the X-Men got to Battleworld, let's have a look to see what they were doing in the lead-up to the series. We'll begin with Uncanny X-Men issue 178. This comic came out the same month as Marvel Age issue 11 and features the very earliest hint at the events that were to come. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the individual issues that we're going to look at because we just got too much to get through. Suffice it to say that where the X-Men are concerned, in the previous issue, Colossus was heated white hot and then subjected to near absolute 0 degree temperatures. That was courtesy of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and it left him in this kind of agonising statue-like state. The bulk of this issue deals with Kitty Pryde's attempts to thaw him out without him dying, and also most of the rest of the team are dealing with another attack by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants that is actually a diversion to allow Mystique the opportunity to try to assassinate Professor X. The part that we are most interested in happens relatively early on, at the bottom of page 4, when Professor X suffers some pain because he feels what he describes a bolt of psionic force smashing through his natural defences like they don't exist. Rogue is there and she hears him cry out in pain, but he doesn't tell her why. He just says he's got some kind of bad headache. He doesn't know where that psionic force came from, nor does he know what it was looking for. And he says that because he says that rather than an attack, it felt more like he was being scanned. And that's it for this issue anyway. Just 3 panels hinting at what is to come. So we have to wait until we get to issue 179. The bulk of this issue deals with the Morlocks' attempts to get Kitty Pryde to wed Caliban. Other than that, Colossus is freed from his frozen statue-like state in this issue. Where Professor X is concerned, again relatively early on in the comic, but he suffers another attack, this time more powerful than the previous one. We have a couple of extra details about it. For example, it says that it's focusing on him, which is a plot point that is never really picked up on. It also says that it won't respond to his attempts to make contact with it. Also, he says it is of extraterrestrial origin. But other than that, he can't tell us any more details. This time it's Nightcrawler that's there to witness him in pain, but again, he doesn't let on to Nightcrawler what the issue is. And again, that's it for that issue. It's issue 180 where things really kick into high gear. Professor X suffers a third one of these episodes, and again it is even more powerful than before. And he says it's a scanning wave. But what is it looking for? Him? And if so, why? And he even says it feels alien, not just to Earth, but to the entire universe. This time it's Storm that witnesses this attack. But again, he doesn't tell her the details of it. Speaking of Storm, a lot of this issue deals with her. Well, her and Kitty, really. Where Storm is concerned, she's having a bit of an identity crisis. She's not quite sure who she is or where she fits in the world anymore because she's changed recently, or at least she feels she has. Feels she's become more ruthless, and she doesn't see herself as a goddess anymore as she used to do. This is something that Kitty has noticed, and Kitty is feeling a bit as though Storm has turned her back on her because Storm has always been a kind of a mother figure to her. Another character that this issue deals with is Peter, Colossus. He is feeling quite maudlin because basically he just doesn't feel that Kitty feels the same way about him as he does about her. And he's also a bit frustrated because he says that it would be different if they were back in Russia. In Russia, they could be married now and raising a family. Peter, she's 14. Speaking of Kitty, she and Storm have a bit of a heart-to-heart where she explains to Storm how she feels that Storm has kind of turned her back on her recently and let her down in a way. And Storm says that she has changed and she understands that it may be difficult for Kitty to understand that, but she needs Kitty to allow her to be who she is. And they end it on good terms. Shortly after that, Kitty is dropped off at the airport along with Doug Ramsey because he has an interview with the Massachusetts Academy, which is run by the Hellfire Club. She's going up there with him to keep him company. The X-Men are a bit worried about this, saying, look, be careful. And she says, it's fine. If I'm in any trouble, I will send a psychic call for help to Professor X. On the plane, suddenly they see the White Queen is there. So Kitty calls to Professor X for help, but he doesn't reply. The reason he hasn't replied is because on the way back from the airport, he explained to the other X-Men he was with what had been happening recently. He tells them about the scanning waves and the fact that he has now managed to pinpoint their source. And it is in the sheep meadow of Central Park in New York City. So he and the other 4 X-Men, that's Storm, Wolverine, Nightcrawler and Colossus, go to Central Park. They get out of the car, go and investigate the sheep meadow. And there they find it. The construct. Now this is the same construct that all of the heroes and all of the villains first appear in at the beginning of Secret Wars, minus the glass domes to stop them suffocating in the cold void of space. They feel strangely drawn towards the construct, so the 5 of them enter it and vanish. And there you have it, a very significant moment as the X-Men leave for the Secret Wars. So that explains, in continuity, why Kitty Pryde wasn't at the Secret Wars. But there were plenty of other classic members of super teams present, weren't there? There was Cyclops and Wolverine of the X-Men. There was Captain America, Hawkeye, Thor, Iron Man from the Avengers. Although most of those people I just listed weren't actually active members of those teams during this event. We didn't look in detail at those X-Men comics, but if we did, you may have noticed that Cyclops didn't feature in any of them. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating by saying that he wasn't a member of the team, but he certainly wasn't around, as he and Madeline Pryor were off on their honeymoon. So what about the Avengers then? Was Captain America a member of the Avengers at this point? Yes, of course he was. But Thor, Iron Man, Hawkeye? No, none of them were active members of the Avengers at this point. You don't believe me? See for yourself. Iron Man issue 181, written by Denny O'Neil, who had some great runs at DC with Batman, and also by teaming up the Green Lantern and Green Arrow in the 1970s, and drawn by Luke McDonnell, a man who never had any significant runs on any title, features Jim Rhodes in the tin suit after Tony Stark had relapsed into alcoholism. That addiction drove Tony out of the Avengers about a year before this issue, and Jim Rhodes just didn't feel he wanted a place on the team. Iron Man would go on to be a founding member of the West Coast Avengers, but he wouldn't rejoin the main team until the 1990s. As for Rhodey, he took over the armour in issue 170 and wore it for the next couple of years. So, it's Rhodey in the tin suit. He isn't an Avenger. What is he up to? At this point in the history of Iron Man, the comic is basically following 2 separate characters. There's Iron Man, in the form of James Rhodes at this point, and Tony Stark. As for Iron Man, he has recently uncovered a plot by the Mandarin to destroy all crops in China in the hope that that will start some kind of huge global conflict of which he can take advantage. Of course, Iron Man foils that plot, but the Mandarin gets away. As for Tony Stark, he is scouring the streets of New York looking for fellow drunk Gretel, who is due to give birth any moment. At the same time, a massive snowstorm has just hit the city. Jim Rhodes finishes up his work in China in time to get the evening flight back to the Big Apple. And once he gets back there, he is told by friend and colleague Morley Irwin that there's something strange in Central Park that is sending the instruments in their lab wild. Iron Man flies to Central Park, which means that for the first time we get to see an aerial view of the construct. It doesn't explicitly say that he's drawn to it, but nonetheless he does land outside of it, walks towards it, and then, alone, the golden non-Avenger vanishes. I told you he wasn't an Avenger. And Thor? Okay, so strictly speaking, he was still on the roster, but he hadn't been seen in the comic for over half a year. And notwithstanding the occasional guest appearance, he wouldn't return as an active member of the team for another 3 years. Where his solo title was concerned, Walt Simonson had recently started his tenure as both artist and writer, a period that remains to this day a defining era in both his career and this title. 4 issues prior to this one, on Walt Simonson's first issue, Beta Ray Bill had been introduced, and this is Thor's first adventure after that story arc. It's also the first time that we see Thor having left behind his mortal persona of Donald Blake. It doesn't take Secret Wars long to rear its head in this issue. Not that you'd know it if you were a reader at the time. Now that Thor isn't Don Blake, he needs to find somewhere to establish himself on Earth. Not knowing where to start, he visits the Avengers mansion to seek out some advice. And there... Dude, where's my comic strip? We see him enter Avengers mansion, and then nothing. Literally 3 empty panels. We are told he finds himself on the most surprising adventure of his career, but that's it. There is another box there saying that it's so surprising that they can't even tell us about it until next month. Watch this space. This comic is cover dated March. The other comics where the main characters and teams left for Secret Wars were dated April. Now I guess that Walt Simonson already had plans for his April issue, and shoehorning in Thor leaving for the Secret Wars just couldn't be done, so he brought it forward a month. But still, this would have made it an exclusive, and the reveal was supposed to be in the April comics. So instead, we get blank space. Okay, well, I guess we're going to have to look at issue 342 to find out what happens. Now, a lot of the action in this story takes place in Asgard, but not all of it. There is some on Earth and even in New York. But nonetheless, flicking through it, there is absolutely no mention in the storyline at all of Secret Wars, or of Thor leaving for Secret Wars, or of him even coming back from Secret Wars. What you actually have to do is take a look at the letters page. At the bottom of the letters page, we actually find the missing panels from the previous issue. And it says here, now they can be shown. Last month's mystery panels. And the idea is, you cut them out of this comic and put them in the previous issue. Okay, well, let's see what that looks like. So this is what it's supposed to look like. Even the wording has changed, because now we've covered over the bit where it says he finds himself on the most surprising adventure of his career. And instead, it says that he's entered Avengers Mansion only to emerge shortly with the other Avengers as they dash into Central Park. Then it's still just the 3 panels. They're exactly the same size as the original blank ones, and they don't contain a great deal of depth of story. We see a little shot of the team dynamically running towards the construct. We get a small view from above of the construct, and then again that big flash of light as the Avengers have now entered it and disappeared. What a strange solution to this particular editorial problem. Now remember as well that this happened early on in this issue. So the rest of this issue, that came out the month before the rest of the heroes left for the Secret Wars, covers Thor after he returns from the Secret Wars. And because of that, we're not going to look at it. Not at the moment anyway. Coincidentally, Thor was one of only 3 heroes that arrived on the Beyonders construct that weren't featured in Mike Zeck's original artwork for the issue 1 cover. Or was he? If we have another look at that article from Marvel Age issue 11 that talks about the Cosmic Champion series, we will see that a section of the original cover artwork is shown. In it, flying above Spider-Man, is Thor. Not only that, but behind him, behind everyone in fact, is the unmistakable form of Mr. Fantastic. If there is any doubt, here is a black and white version showing the full illustration. Both were edited out of the final version, along with Kitty Pryde. Oh, the other missing hero, Professor X, and it looks like he was never included. Now there is one more Avenger who has a solo title, so let's see how the Star-Spangled Avengers creative team dealt with him joining the front line. Captain America issue 292 is another comic with a cover that says "Buy Me Now." This is written by James DeMatteis, with Paul Neary providing pencils. The regular penciler, up until shortly before this issue, was Secret War's own Mike Zeck. This issue features a Native American adversary for Captain America, who unusually doesn't possess a tracking superpower. I have to say, the quality of the contents of this issue matched the cover, and I wish I could spend more time going into detail about it. At this point in time, Captain America is living with Jack Monroe. Now, he was Bucky during the 1950s, when William Burnside was the man wearing the Captain America uniform. He ended up being cryogenically frozen, and he was only revived 11 issues ago. So he's very much a fish out of water in the modern world. The antagonist in this issue is the Black Crow. He is a Native American character who feels that he must defeat the symbol of modern America, that's Captain America, to atone for all of the heinous crimes and sins committed against the native population. He sets out intending to destroy, to kill Captain America. However, he is satisfied, and he believes that the Earth Spirit is satisfied with just a submission from Captain America. Yes, Captain America submits. At least that's what it looks like. Cap's girlfriend is so relieved that he survived the encounter that she proposes to him. Oh, isn't that lovely? What a lovely ending to the story. Oh, yeah, Secret Wars. There is one more page. Several days later. It's similar to those 3 small panels in the Thor comic, but it's expanded a little bit. Again, we get a bit of an aerial shot of the construct, and again, we get a little dynamic view of the Avengers running towards it. And again, we see them enter it and vanish. Now that is what I call an afterthought. We've mentioned them a few times now, so let's stop beating around the bush, shall we? You'll remember that back in X-Men issue 178, we got the first hint of events to come when Professor X felt that he was being scanned. Well, he wasn't the only one. That same month, in issue 240 of the Avengers, most of the team were dealing with a spooky mystery surrounding Jessica Drew, the woman otherwise known as Spider-Woman. Speaking of women, the team was very female-heavy at this point in time. Captain America had limited the team to just 6 active members back in issue 211, although that rule does seem to be rather loosely adhered to. At this present moment in time, out of the 6 active members, 4 of them were women. The She-Hulk, Wasp, the Scarlet Witch and Captain Marvel. What's the world coming to, eh? Only joking, ladies. Roger Stern wrote this one, with help from Ann Nocenti, and the breakdowns were provided by regular Avengers artist at this point, Al Milgrom. Tigra has called the Avengers to San Francisco, where Jessica Drew is lying in a kind of coma-like state and being haunted, it seems, by her superhero alter ego, Spider-Woman. The Vision is recovering from his battle with Annihilus in issue 233, and whilst his physical body is recuperating, he's plugged his consciousness into the Avengers Mansion computer. And it's whilst he's plugged into this computer that it suffers an all-pervading power flux. And just as it seems it's going to overload all the systems, it stops, it vanishes, just as quickly as it arrived. And again, as with the X-Men, that's it with this issue. And again, as with the X-Men, the Vision keeps this to himself, just as Professor X did. So we then have to move on to the next issue, 241, to get our next mention of it. In this issue, we discover that Morgan Le Fay is the person behind Jessica Drew's coma-like state. And whilst the rest of the team battle her, Captain America and Hawkeye are back at Avengers Mansion, and they're talking to a kind of holographic image of the Vision's consciousness when one of the computer banks overloads. The Vision says, "Oh, sorry about that, it's just a little overload, it's all dealt with, nothing to worry about." And Captain America finds this a bit of a curious response from the Vision. Nonetheless, Hawkeye says, leave him to it, he knows what he's doing. Those two walk off, and they leave the Vision to contemplate the fact that this is the second big power surge, larger than the previous one, and he cannot work out where it's coming from. So that's it for that issue. Again, we have to move on to the April cover dated issue, which is 242, and look at that for a sinister cover. All the Avengers looking shocked, and that shadowy figure saying, "Okay, Avengers, this party's over." So in this issue, all of the Avengers are actually returning back to Avengers Mansion, where a surprise party has been arranged to celebrate the wedding of Hawkeye and Mockingbird. During this party, not only does Thor return, because he hasn't been on active duty for a while, but the Vision has recovered, and he makes a dramatic entrance, before then dramatically announcing that he and the Scarlet Witch must stay with the Avengers, because they will be needed in the upcoming emergency. Now I say stay with the Avengers because at the moment the pair of them are actually just reservist members. Wait a minute. That's the Vision, isn't it? So this cover with the shocked faces and the shadowy figure saying the party's over, it's just the Vision arriving and saying, actually guys, it's getting quite late, we've got work to do, the party's at an end. What a letdown. At this point, the Vision explains to all of the Avengers about the two power fluctuations that he's experienced recently. And he says that because he and Wanda are so powerful, they are bound to be of use in the upcoming crisis, whatever form that crisis may take. This then sets Hawkeye off to have doubts about how useful or how needed he will be in any kind of massive crisis. He points out the fact that the Vision and Scarlet Witch are very powerful, and so is Thor. With people like that coming back, and the 6-person limit that Captain America instigated in issue 211, he's thinking, why would they keep around a guy who just fires off trick arrows? Despite that, he says that if the Avengers are going to go up against some new menace, he wants to face it with them, alongside his friends. Isn't it great to have a bit of depth to the people involved in Secret Wars? The Wasp, as chair of the Avengers, is trying to work out the 6 people that are going to make the cut for the new team. But while she's in the middle of doing that, the priority alarm sounds. The Vision says that there's been another power flux, but this time he should be able to trace the source of it. I don't need to tell you that that's in Central Park, but it's directly across the street from Avengers Mansion. So all of the heroes that are there head towards the park. Those that can fly are actually the first to make visual contact with the construct before their earthbound colleagues catch up with them. Briefly, they speculate about the nature of the construct before 6 of them walk into it through the entrance and, of course, vanish. Now, we aren't talking strictly about the Avengers here. We're just talking about the first 6 heroes that entered it at that point. For example, Hawkeye entered and left Mockingbird outside. The Vision, Scarlet Witch and Star Fox, all 3 of whom are very powerful, are still outside the construct. They quickly decide to follow their colleagues, but before they can walk through the portal, the whole thing vanishes. Those 4 are stuck on Earth. The other 6 are off to Battleworld. There is one more former Avenger that was involved in Secret Wars, but when I say former, I mean a long time ago. The Incredible Hulk. Now, broadly speaking, this was during the Hulk's mindless monster era, although since 1982, Bruce Banner had managed to exert control over his alter ego. This meant he could change at will, and even then, the Hulk retained Bruce Banner's mind. This is Incredible Hulk issue 292, and it features its usual creative team. That consists of Bill Mantlo, a man who had been the writer for roughly the previous 50 issues, and Sal Buscema, who had been the penciler for roughly the last 100 issues. Bruce and his girlfriend, Kate Waynesborough, are flying to Mexico, where scientists, unencumbered by the red tape of the United States of America, have built a fully functioning replica of his gamma scope. Now, the gamma scope is similar to a telescope, at least to look at, and it's used to scan the heavens like a telescope, searching for gamma rays. And when it finds them, it can lock onto them and focus them onto a subject to, in theory, improve the health of that subject. Now, this university in Mexico that have built this replica, they are using it and they are focusing the gamma rays onto plant seeds in a hope to improve crops and feed the poor, that kind of thing. Now, when Bruce and Kate are having a private discussion, he says to her that before they flew down to Mexico, he was looking through his own gamma scope back at the lab. And whilst he was looking through it, searching for those gamma rays in the cosmos, he detected a strange, unexplained surge of power in the heavens. It flared for an instant and then vanished as if it had never been. And we see that power surge. Sadly, it isn't that same distinctive shape that the Beyonder had at the beginning of the Secret Wars limited series. That would have been brilliant. And then the conversation moves on, and the rest of the issue shows Bruce and the Hulk dealing with the Ringmaster and the Circus of Crime after Dragon Man, who at this point is with the Circus of Crime as one of like the exhibits, after Dragon Man destroys all of those gamma irradiated crops that have been made big and strong and healthy. Kate and Bruce fly back to the United States of America in issue 293 of The Incredible Hulk. But before they go home, they stop off at the Baxter building, where Reed Richards has agreed to let Bruce use his laboratory equipment. Bruce mentions that energy surge from the last issue, and he says that although he detected it, he wasn't able to track it with the equipment he had down there. But maybe Reed Richards' devices can. And indeed, as he's using Reed's equipment, he does find another power surge, of course more powerful than the previous one. And for once, we're actually told the location of this power surge. It's in Quadrant 14, wherever that is. Bruce also says that not only is it more powerful than the previous power surge, but it's directed at Earth. And he says, in fact, it seems to know that they are observing it. And it's reacting. And he turns into the Hulk just in time to save Kate from being hit by this power surge. However, it does damage or even destroy some of the lab equipment, so he's no longer able to trace the source of it. He's going to return back to his own lab, where not only will he think some more about what's happened here, but he's also going to try and move his own research with the gamma scope forward and see if it can be used on animals or even ultimately on humans. And he does that in issue 294. In this issue, his research is actually pushed beyond the levels that he's comfortable doing it in. Initially, he uses it with some success on pets. For example, this dog had an incurable bone disease. And look at it now. Oh yeah, there is a slight side effect, which is that it turns the patient green. But that's a small price to pay, isn't it, for a new lease of life? The real problems begin with aging crime boss Max Stryker. He wants Bruce to use the machinery on him to cure the incurable disease that he has. But Bruce says no, it's too soon to use it on a person, more tests need to be done, it may be dangerous. But Max Stryker isn't the kind of man to take no for an answer. So he hires Boomerang. And it'll be Boomerang's job to force Bruce Banner to help him. Now Boomerang, as with the rest of the world at this moment in time, knows that Bruce is the Hulk. So he's a bit nervous, but he's a man with nothing to lose, so he takes the job. And his particular strategy for getting Bruce's help is to kidnap his girlfriend, Kate Waynesborough, and hold her hostage until Bruce helps Max Stryker. Things don't go entirely to plan for Boomerang though, because as he is trying to kidnap Kate, Bruce overhears the struggle, he transforms into the Hulk and runs out to attempt to save her. And we have a nice little fight here between the two of them. Boomerang doubtless is outclassed by the Hulk, but nonetheless he uses his wits and a gravity ring to get the better of the Hulk, albeit temporarily, and make off with Kate. By the time the Hulk frees himself, both Boomerang and Kate have gone, and Max Stryker is in their place. And he says, "Help me cure my cancer with your gamma scope, and I will tell you where Boomerang has taken your girlfriend." So reluctantly, Bruce agrees. Max Stryker is laid out on the table, and as Bruce looks up through the gamma scope, again he sees an energy surge in space. But of course at the moment he has got more pressing concerns on his mind. He flips the switch and Max Stryker is cured. We assume he's cured. He certainly instantly feels healthier and has turned green. With the procedure a success, Max tells Bruce where Boomerang has taken his girlfriend. And instantly Bruce, the Hulk, leaps out of the observatory and heads off to find them in New York. Max Stryker lives just off of Central Park, and as the Hulk lands there, he sees a statue that's been erected in his honour, because at the moment the world does see him as a hero. Then as he continues to walk through Central Park, he's distracted. He's distracted by a glowing edifice, Stonehenge-like, they say here. He is compelled towards it, and he enters it and vanishes. And it says that what he discovers within the edifice is a tale for another time and another place. We know where that is. There is, of course, one more solo character that was present at the Secret Wars, the Wondrous Webslinger. In 1984, he was maintaining 3 titles. 2 of these, Marvel Team Up and Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, didn't focus on events in the lead up to Secret Wars, other than the occasional asterisked reference to things that were happening in the 3rd title, The Amazing Spider-Man. We begin with issue 249 and follow a very familiar pattern. As you can see, we're in the midst of the Hobgoblin saga, a character and storyline created by Roger Stern and John Romita Jr., incidentally the creative team behind this and the next issue, before Ron Frenz and Tom DeFalco take over on issue 251, but one issue at a time. Peter Parker is attending a housewarming party for Liz and Harry Osborn, although it looks more like he's attending Club Tropicana. Whilst there, he experiences a buzz from his spider sense unlike any he's ever felt before. Now, in fairness, he does say that quite a lot. And in the very next picture, it seems to all be forgotten about because he and Mary Jane are messing around, having fun, diving in the swimming pool. The buzz itself was very intense, suggesting massive danger. And Peter wonders what event it could be that could cause such a sudden, massive danger, but then pass so quickly. And it says at the bottom that when that question is finally answered, his life will never be the same. And that's another claim that is constantly made in comics, isn't it? But you know what? For once, I think it's probably true. Other than the housewarming party, the rest of this issue, of course, deals with the Hobgoblin, because we are in the midst of the Hobgoblin saga. But we're not going to look at that. Not today. Instead, we're going to move ahead to the next issue, issue number 250, again with the Hobgoblin sitting on the front cover. At the end of the previous issue, Hobgoblin hit Spider-Man with a gas that numbed his spider sense. Despite that, it won't surprise you to hear that Spidey has an even bigger, mysterious buzz via his spider sense in this issue. Now, whereas the likes of Bruce Banner and the Vision were able to use their scientific instruments to pinpoint the source of the energy fluxes, and even Professor X was able to vaguely work out from where the scanning wave was coming from, Peter is unable to do any of those things. All he knows is that there was a really, really big danger that came into existence and then just as suddenly passed. Naturally, things come to a head in the next issue, the issue that's cover dated April, and that's number 251. The bulk of this issue is given over to Spider-Man's battle with the Hobgoblin, but then right at the end we see Peter Parker meet up with Harry Osborn. They meet in Central Park, but it's after they go their separate ways that things begin to get really interesting. And not just for Peter Parker, but for us as well. Because we have been given a really, really rare opportunity to see how different creative teams deal with the exact same script. Because you'll remember, at this stage, Spider-Man is in 3 different titles. All 3 of them cover what happens next. Now, I say there are 3 different creative teams. That said, Ron Frenz provides the pencils in 2 out of these 3 issues. But even so, it is still interesting to see the differences and to see how the inkers do their jobs differently. So we know that Peter and Harry met in Central Park, and Peter has just said goodbye to him. However, if we look at issue 89 of Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, after that issue's storyline is out the way, we again go to Central Park and see Peter waving goodbye to Harry Osborn, but it says here that it is sometime later. More than that, if we look at issue 140 of Marvel Team Up, again we see the same scene in Central Park, with Peter saying goodbye to Harry. This time, however, it says that it's 1 day later. So already that's interesting, because now what we know is that the events of the storyline in this comic happened before the events in that comic, and they happened before the events in that comic. But that's just the start. Here we see Peter being hit by the biggest warning from his spider sense yet. And here is the same shot, if you like, in Marvel Team Up. Ron Frenz is providing the breakdowns for both of them, but the finishes in Amazing Spider-Man is Klaus Janson, and in Marvel Team Up it's Mike Esposito. Al Milgrom and Jim Mooney, in the middle of what I think is a brilliant run on Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man, have a slightly different approach to the same image. In that same issue, as Spider-Man swings off, he says, "Oh my gosh, this can't be real." A scene to which Ron Frenz, as you can see, takes a different approach in both of the other two titles. So what about the construct? Well, as much as the Spectacular Spider-Man and Marvel Team Up do a fine job of representing it, nothing can really beat the Amazing Spider-Man's approach, which actually stretches across 2 pages. And we all know how this ends, don't we? Spider-Man, in 2 out of the 3 issues at least, scratches his head over it. Then he's drawn towards the construct, swings towards the entrance, and vanishes. That's another one down. Who's left? Nearly all of our players are in place. Just 3 remain on Earth. To find out how they join the fun, we need to look at another comic that was cover dated February, and that is Fantastic Four, issue 263. By the way, if you're wondering why I keep saying cover dated rather than just the month that they came out, make sure you watch part 2 of this review. Now, I know what you're thinking. Something brief but significant is going to happen in this issue, before in the following month something slightly more significant happens, and then in the April cover dated issue they all go to Central Park and enter the construct. Well, you are kind of right, but that pattern isn't followed in the conventional way this time. By the way, this is all unfolding during John Byrne's legendary 5-year run on the title as both writer and artist. He also had a legendary 2-year run on Alpha Flight, spent a few years on the X-Men that were quite legendary, and then produced work with DC Comics to revamp and overhaul Superman, which was quite literally legendary. So, time for something brief but significant? Incredibly brief, but no less significant. In an issue dominated by a storyline that sees the Human Torch being a racing driver and the Thing stumbling across the morbid Mole Man, our interest is in the subtlest nod to the Secret Wars imaginable. Just one panel. As Reed is checking over the instruments in one of his labs, he's distracted and he says, the automatic scanners, what on earth? And that's it. Just one panel, and there is no other mention in the entire comic. We don't even know what's happened. We only know what's happened here because of a reference made in the following issue, number 264. You know the drill by now, don't you? Because in that issue, we see that Reed's automated scanners have been picking up what he describes as an unidentified energy glitch, and they've been doing so for several days now. After the latest one, he's been able to get some kind of direction on where it's coming from, and so he's heading out in the Fantastic Car to go and investigate. Of course, he traces it to Central Park, and once there, he takes out a little gizmo that he says he put together shortly before the alarm sounded, and that was in the previous issue. We didn't even know it was an alarm. There was no alarm sound effect, it was just him being distracted. And he uses his little gizmo to try to really get a precise location on where this energy is coming from, but there's nothing there. The entire area is now clear. The only other thing he says is that it did seem as though the energies were somehow intelligent and that they were searching for something. And then it says, and you can see the mystery begin to unravel in The Thing, issue 10. Okay, well, let's have a look at that then. This is our April issue, not Fantastic Four issue 265, which, although was an April comic, was actually set after the events of Secret Wars. Interestingly, out of all the comics we've looked at from all these different characters and teams, this is the only one that features the construct on the cover. John Byrne is still the writer, although now it's Ron Wilson that is the penciler. A large part of this issue is spent in the company of both the Thing and also Alicia, his long-term girlfriend. And although he's still very much in love with her, he's beginning to think that maybe she's better off without him, because she can never have a proper life, a proper relationship with him that she deserves. And perhaps Ben Grimm, the man, is gone forever. At one point, whilst they are in the midst of a heart-to-heart, Mr. Fantastic bursts in, saying thank God Ben is still there, because something has happened that has sent the instruments in his lab right off the dial. And it's as if the fabric of the universe has ripped wide open. So Thing, Mr. Fantastic and the Human Torch are all going to go off and investigate. Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman, is staying at home because she is heavily pregnant with the Richards' second child. A storyline that ends tragically. Before long, the Human Torch and the Fantastic Car approach the Construct. And we actually get given some additional information and insights into the Construct in this comic that we haven't had in any of the others. For a start, we can see inside it. Also, Johnny Storm says, is it his imagination or is it bigger on the inside than on the outside? Then, uniquely out of all of these lead-up comics, we see them inside it. They walk through the entrance, they don't vanish instantaneously, they're standing there and it's quite peaceful. In fact, they comment on the fact that it feels nice for some reason in there. It says the air is definitely cleaner and there's some kind of soothing effect, almost like a psionic tranquilizer. And I guess there is a kind of an explanation as to what it is that's been drawing all these heroes to enter the Construct. Reed says it's almost like it's a kind of a lure. And Johnny Storm says, you mean like a trap? And with that, they are gone. What can I say? The cast is assembled. The secret wars are about to begin.